Captain Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the ESS Liberty and looked out at the stars. The ship was quiet except for the soft hum of the engines and the beeping of computer screens. Jake had been in space for 10 years, but he had never seen anything like what was coming toward Earth. The Galactic Dominion fleet hung in space like a collection of deadly jewels. Their ships were huge and beautiful, made of some kind of crystal that caught the light from distant stars. Each ship was 3 times bigger than anything humans had ever built. The aliens had been ruling the galaxy for 3,000 years, and their technology was so advanced that most species just gave up fighting when they arrived. Jake touched the communication panel on his chair. Admiral Barnes, this is Captain Sullivan. The alien fleet is holding position at the edge of the solar system. They're not moving closer yet. Admiral Lisa Barnes was back on Earth, sitting in the command center that had been built deep underground. She was a tough woman who had spent her whole career preparing for this day. Everyone had known that someday humans would meet aliens, but nobody had expected them to be so powerful and so unfriendly. "Copy that, Jake," Lisa said through the radio. "What's your assessment of their fleet?" Jake looked at the readings on his screen. The numbers were scary. 47 ships, Admiral. The biggest one is about 2 miles long. Our sensors are picking up energy signatures we've never seen before. These aren't like anything in our databases. The truth was that human technology looked like toys compared to what the Dominion had. The Liberty was Earth's newest and best warship, but it was built from steel and titanium, powered by nuclear reactors, and armed with weapons that shot chunks of metal really fast. The alien ships seemed to be made of pure energy held together by materials that human science couldn't understand. Lieutenant Commander Paul Martinez was sitting at the weapons station. He was a good officer, but Jake could see the worry in his eyes. "Captain, I've been studying their ships for the past 6 hours. I can't figure out how their weapons work. They don't use missiles or bullets. Everything seems to be some kind of energy beam." Jake nodded. The intelligence reports had been clear about this. The Dominion had weapons that could turn entire cities into glass in seconds. Their shields could stop any attack that humans could throw at them. Every species they had conquered had tried to fight back, and every species had failed. "What about their shields?" Jake asked. Paul looked at his computer screen. "That's the scary part, sir. Our best guess is that they can absorb energy attacks and spread the power across their whole ship. If we hit them with our railguns, the shields will just soak up the impact like a sponge." The railgun was humanity's best weapon. It used magnetic fields to shoot pieces of metal at incredible speeds. The projectiles moved so fast they could punch through any armor that humans had ever made. But the alien shields were designed to handle much more powerful attacks. On the other side of the solar system, Commander Zexthel was standing in the command center of his flagship, the Eternal Conquest. He looked like a giant insect with 4 arms and eyes that could see in directions that humans couldn't imagine. He had been fighting wars for the Dominion for over 200 years, and he had never lost a battle. "Report," Zexthel said to his weapons officer. His voice sounded like clicking metal when it came through the translation system. "The human fleet consists of 3 primitive vessels," the officer replied. "They appear to be constructed from basic metals and powered by nuclear fission reactors. Their weapons are kinetic projectile systems with no energy components." Zexthel made a sound that was the alien equivalent of laughter. "Kinetic projectiles? These creatures are still throwing rocks at their enemies. How quaint." The Dominion had stopped using kinetic weapons over 1,000 years ago. Why shoot pieces of metal when you could fire pure energy that moved at the speed of light? Why build heavy armor when you could create shields that could stop any attack? The human ships looked like museum pieces to the advanced aliens. "What are their shield capabilities?" Zexthel asked. "They don't appear to have energy shields at all, Commander. Their protection seems to be limited to physical armor plating. Our plasma cannons will cut through their hulls like they're made of paper." This was typical of primitive species. They always relied on thick armor instead of proper defensive systems. The Dominion had perfected the art of war. Their weapons were clean, efficient, and devastating. Their shields were elegant solutions that could stop any attack. Their ships were works of art that moved through space like dancers. Back on the Liberty, Jake was reading the message that had just arrived from the Dominion fleet. The aliens had sent their demands in perfect English, which was scary because it meant they had been studying humanity for a long time. Primitive species of the third planet, the message began. You are hereby ordered to surrender unconditionally to the Galactic Dominion. Your crude technology and barbaric culture will be absorbed into our empire. You have one standard day to comply. If you resist, your planet will be cleansed of all life. The message was signed by Commander Zexthal, Supreme Fleet Commander of the Dominion's 7th Conquest Fleet. Jake had read about the Dominion in the intelligence reports. They had conquered over 10,000 worlds. Species that surrendered were allowed to live as slaves. Species that fought back were completely destroyed. Admiral Barnes, Jake said into his radio, I'm forwarding you the Dominion's ultimatum. They want an answer in 24 hours. Lisa's voice came back immediately. I've already seen it, Captain. The President and the Defense Council are meeting right now. But I think we all know what the answer is going to be. Jake nodded. Humanity had never been good at backing down from a fight, even when the odds were hopeless. The 3 ships in his small fleet were all that stood between Earth and conquest. The Liberty, the ESS Defiance commanded by Captain Ryan Brooks, and the ESS Vengeance under Captain Amy Foster. 3 ships against 47. Sir? Paul said from his station. I've been thinking about their shields. What if we're looking at this wrong? Jake turned to his weapons officer. What do you mean? Well, their shields are designed to handle energy weapons, right? Plasma cannons, laser beams, particle accelerators. All the advanced stuff. But what if they've never had to deal with good old-fashioned kinetic energy? Jake thought about this. You mean they might not be ready for our railguns? It's possible, sir. Every species they've conquered probably had energy weapons. Why would they bother preparing for something as primitive as a chunk of metal moving? Really fast? It was a thin hope, but it was something. Jake looked out at the alien fleet again. In 18 hours, they would have their answer. Either humanity would surrender and become slaves, or they would fight and probably die. But at least they would go down fighting. All right, people, Jake said to his crew. We've got 18 hours to figure out how to beat the most advanced military force in the galaxy. Let's get to work. The Liberty was small and ugly compared to the alien ships, but it was home. Jake had served on this ship for 3 years, and he knew every bolt and wire in its hull. It might not be much, but it was human, and that had to count for something. As the hours passed, Jake found himself thinking about Earth. His sister lived in Chicago with her 2 kids. His parents had a farm in Kansas where they grew corn and raised cattle. None of them had ever asked to be part of a galactic war, but here they were. The funny thing was that the aliens thought human technology was primitive. They looked at the Liberty's steel hull and chemical rockets and nuclear weapons and saw a backward species that had barely learned to leave their home planet. They didn't understand that sometimes the simplest solutions were the best ones. Jake smiled as he looked at the enemy fleet. Tomorrow they would find out just how dangerous primitive humans could be. The 24 hours passed quickly. Jake Sullivan stood on the bridge of the Liberty, watching as the Dominion fleet began to move toward Earth. The alien ships moved smoothly through space, their crystal hulls catching the light from the sun and throwing it back in rainbow patterns. They were beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Admiral Barnes, Jake said into his radio, the enemy fleet is advancing. They're moving in formation toward the inner system. Lisa's voice came back. From Earth. Copy that, Captain. The President has given his answer to the Dominion. We will not surrender. You are cleared to engage the enemy. Jake felt his heart beating faster. This was it. 3 human ships were about to fight the most powerful military force in the galaxy. It was probably suicide, but at least they would die fighting for their home. All ships, this is Captain Sullivan, Jake broadcast to the other 2 ships in his small fleet. We are cleared to engage. Remember, we've studied their tactics. They like to fight at long range with their energy weapons. We need to get in close where our weapons can do some damage. Captain Ryan Brooks answered from the ESS Defiance. Roger that, Jake. My ship is ready. We've got a full load of nuclear warheads, and we're not afraid to use them. Captain Amy Foster's voice came from the ESS Vengeance. Vengeance is ready for action. Our magnetic accelerator cannon is charged and ready to fire. The three human ships began to move toward the alien fleet. They looked tiny compared to the massive Dominion vessels, like minnows swimming toward a school of sharks. But they were fast and maneuverable, and they had crews who were ready to fight. Commander Zexthel watched the approaching human ships from his command center. The Eternal Conquest was the biggest ship in his fleet, over 2 miles long and armed with enough firepower to destroy a small moon. The human ships were so small that his weapons officer had to use the ship's computers to keep track of them. These primitives actually think they can fight us, Zexthel said to his crew. Very well, let us show them the power of the Dominion. The alien commander gave the order to attack. The Dominion ships opened fire with their plasma cannons. Beams of pure energy, hotter than the surface of a star, reached out across space toward the human ships. The energy weapons moved at the speed of light, creating brilliant streaks of red and blue fire in the darkness. Jake felt the Liberty shake as a plasma beam passed close to his ship. The beam missed, but the heat from it was so intense that it melted some of the paint on the hull. The ship's computers started beeping warnings about hull temperature. Evasive maneuvers, Jake ordered. Don't let them get a lock on us. The Liberty began to twist and turn through space, dodging the energy beams that were trying to destroy it. The ship's nuclear engines worked at maximum power, pushing the vessel through loops and spirals that would have been impossible for the bigger alien ships. Paul Martinez was at the weapons station, watching the enemy ships on his screen. Captain, I'm getting a good look at their shields. Every time they fire their weapons, the shields flicker for just a second. Jake nodded. This was useful information. Can you time our shots to hit them when their shields are down? Maybe, sir, but we need to get closer. Our railguns are accurate, but at this range we're just throwing metal into space. The Liberty accelerated toward the enemy fleet. Plasma beams reached out to swat the small ship, but Jake was a good pilot and he knew how to use the ship's size to his advantage. The big alien ships had trouble tracking something so small and fast. On the ESS Defiance, Captain Brooks was having similar problems. His ship was taking hits from the energy weapons and the hull was starting to glow red from the heat. But Brooks had an idea. He had been studying the way the alien ships moved, and he had noticed something interesting. "All hands, prepare for nuclear launch," Brooks announced to his crew. "We're going to try something different." The Defiance carried 12 nuclear warheads, each one powerful enough to destroy a city. But Brooks wasn't planning to use them the way most people would expect. He had worked with the weapons designers back on Earth to modify the warheads in a special way. Target the biggest ship, Brooks ordered. Fire one warhead, maximum yield. The nuclear missile launched from the Defiance and streaked toward the Eternal Conquest. The alien ship's defense systems saw it coming and tried to shoot it down with their energy weapons, but the missile was small and fast. It got through their defensive fire and exploded just a few hundred meters from the ship's hull. Commander Zexthel felt his ship shake from the nuclear explosion. The blast was primitive compared to the weapons his people used, but it was still powerful. More importantly, the explosion had created something that the Dominion had never seen before. What was that? Zexthel demanded. His weapons officer was studying the readings from the explosion. The primitive nuclear device created a brief pulse of directed energy, Commander. It was like a laser beam that lasted for only a few microseconds. Zexthel was confused. That's impossible. You can't create a laser beam from a nuclear explosion. But the humans had figured out how to do exactly that. The nuclear warhead had been designed to focus its energy into a brief, intense X-ray laser. Pulse, the beam had lasted for only a tiny fraction of a second, but it had been powerful enough to punch through the eternal Conquest's shields. Jake saw the results of Brooks' attack on his screen. Did you see that? A nuclear blast created some kind of energy beam. It got through their shields. Paul was excited. Captain, I think I understand what happened. The explosion created a directed energy pulse that their shields couldn't handle. It was like using their own technology against them. The Liberty continued to dodge plasma beams as it got closer to the enemy fleet. Jake could see that the alien ships were starting to spread out, trying to surround the 3 human vessels, but the humans were too fast and too unpredictable. Fire railguns, Jake ordered. Target the ship that Brooks damaged. The Liberty's railgun fired a stream of tungsten projectiles at the Eternal Conquest. The metal slugs were moving at incredible speed, faster than any bullet that had ever been fired on Earth. They slammed into the alien ship's hull and punched through the armor like it was made of paper, but something strange happened. Instead of just making holes in the hull, the railgun projectiles seemed to cause more damage than they should have. The alien ship's system started failing, and Jake could see explosions inside the vessel. What's happening to their ship? Paul asked Jake. Studied the readings on his screen. I think their hulls are designed to handle energy weapons, not kinetic impacts. When our projectiles hit them, they're causing damage that spreads through the whole ship. The Dominion had built their ships to fight other energy-based civilizations. Their hulls were designed to absorb and redirect energy attacks, but they had never had to deal with simple chunks of metal moving at high speed. The kinetic energy from the railgun projectiles was tearing through systems that weren't built to handle that kind of impact. Captain Foster on the ESS Vengeance was having her own success. Her ship carried a special weapon called a magnetic accelerator cannon. It was like a railgun, but much more powerful. It could fire dense metal rods at speeds that were a significant fraction of the speed of light. Target acquired, Foster announced. Firing accelerator cannon. The Vengeance fired a stream of depleted uranium rods at one of the smaller alien ships. The projectiles were moving so fast that they were almost invisible. They hit the alien vessel and passed completely through it, leaving holes that went from one side of the ship to the other. The alien ship exploded in a brilliant fireball. It was the first Dominion vessel to be completely destroyed in the battle. Commander Zexthal watched in shock as one of his ships was torn apart by primitive kinetic weapons. This wasn't supposed to happen. The humans were using technology that was thousands of years old, but somehow it was working against the most advanced ships in the galaxy. All ships, focus fire on the human vessels, Zexthal ordered. Destroy them immediately. The entire Dominion fleet turned their weapons on the 3 human ships. The space around Earth's defenders filled with plasma beams and energy bolts. The Liberty, Defiance, and Vengeance twisted and turned through the deadly light show, their hulls glowing from the heat of near misses. Jake felt sweat running down his face as he piloted the Liberty through the enemy fire. The ship was taking damage, but it was still fighting. More importantly, the human ships were proving that the Dominion wasn't invincible. All ships, continue the attack, Jake broadcast. We're hurting them. Keep hitting them with everything we've got. The battle continued to rage in the space between Earth and Mars. The alien ships were powerful, but they were designed to fight enemies who used the same kind of technology they did. The humans were fighting differently, using weapons and tactics that the Dominion had never encountered. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Galactic Dominion was facing an enemy that refused to fight by their rules, and they were starting to lose. The battle had been going on for 2 hours now, and Commander Zexthal was starting to feel something he had never experienced before in his 200 years of military service: fear. The human ships were still alive, still fighting, and still doing damage to his fleet. 3 ships the size of small buildings were holding their own against 47 vessels that could each destroy a planet. Damage report, Zexthal demanded from his bridge crew. His tactical officer's voice was shaking. Commander, we have lost 4 ships completely. The Eternal Conquest has suffered major damage to the forward sections. 7 other vessels are reporting critical system failures. Zexthal looked at the tactical display. The three human ships were moving in patterns that made no sense. They didn't fight like civilized species. Instead of engaging in proper long-range combat, they were darting in and out of his formation like angry insects. They would fire their primitive weapons and then disappear behind his own ships, using the Dominion fleet as cover. "How are they doing this?" Zexthel asked. "Their weapons are thousands of years behind ours. Their ships are made of basic metals. This should be impossible." On the Liberty, Jake Sullivan was asking himself the same question, but from the other side. His ship was badly damaged. The hull was covered with scorch marks from near misses by plasma beams. 3 of his crew members were in the medical bay with burns, but somehow they were winning. "Captain," Paul Martinez called from his weapons station, "I think I'm starting to understand what's happening. The alien ships are designed to fight other energy-based civilizations. Their shields, their armor, their whole defensive system is built to handle plasma weapons and laser beams." Jake nodded. This made sense. "But not kinetic weapons." "Exactly, sir. When we hit them with our railguns, their shields try to absorb the energy and spread it around the ship. But kinetic energy doesn't work that way. When a chunk of metal hits something at high speed, it transfers all its energy into one small area." Paul brought up a diagram on his screen. "Look at this, Captain. Their shields are like a net that's designed to catch energy beams. But our railgun projectiles are like rocks thrown at the net. They don't get caught, they just punch right through." This was the flaw that the Dominion had never considered. For 3,000 years, they had been fighting enemies who used the same basic technology they did. Energy weapons, plasma shields, directed energy systems. Every species they had conquered had developed along similar lines. The Dominion's weapons and defenses had been perfected to fight these kinds of enemies, but humans had taken a different path. Earth had developed nuclear weapons early in their technological development. They had learned to throw things really hard and really fast. Their military thinking was based on the idea that sometimes the simplest solution was the best one. Why build a complex energy weapon when you could just shoot a piece of metal at your enemy? Captain Ryan Brooks on the ESS Defiance was making the most of this discovery. His ship carried 24 nuclear warheads, and he had been experimenting with different ways to use them. The nuclear pumped X-ray laser effect that had damaged the Eternal Conquest was just the beginning. "Weapons officer," Brooks called to his crew, "prepare 3 warheads for simultaneous detonation. I want to try something." Brooks had been studying the way the Dominion ships moved. They stayed in formation with their shields overlapping to provide mutual protection. But this formation was designed to defend against energy weapons that traveled in straight lines. Nuclear explosions were different. They created spheres of destruction that could affect multiple targets at once. "Fire pattern Delta," Brooks ordered. 3 nuclear missiles launched from the Defiance at the same time. They were programmed to detonate at different distances from the enemy formation. The first warhead exploded close to the alien ships, creating an intense X-ray laser pulse. The second warhead detonated further away, creating a massive electromagnetic pulse that interfered with the alien sensors. The third warhead exploded at maximum range, creating a cloud of radioactive debris that made it hard for the alien ships to see what was happening. The result was chaos in the Dominion formation. The alien ships, which had been moving in perfect coordination, suddenly found themselves blind and confused. Their sophisticated sensors couldn't handle the multiple types of interference that the nuclear explosions had created. "Now," Brooks said to his crew, "while they're confused, fire all railguns." The Defiance's kinetic weapons opened up on the disoriented alien ships. Tungsten projectiles slammed into hulls that were designed to deflect energy beams but had no defense against simple chunks of metal moving at incredible speed. 2 more Dominion ships exploded in brilliant fireballs. Captain Amy Foster on the ESS Vengeance was having her own success with a different approach. Her ship's magnetic accelerator cannon was designed to fire dense metal rods at relativistic speeds. The projectiles moved so fast that they were almost impossible to track, and when they hit their targets, they delivered enormous amounts of kinetic energy. "Target the command ship," Foster ordered. "Maximum power." The Vengeance's accelerator. Cannon fired a stream of depleted uranium rods at the Eternal Conquest. The projectiles were moving at 15% of the speed of light. At that velocity, each rod carried as much energy as a small nuclear weapon, but delivered it in a completely different way. The uranium rods punched through the Eternal Conquest's shields as if they weren't there. The shields tried to absorb the energy and redistribute it, but the kinetic impact was too focused and too powerful. The rods tore through the alien ship's hull, creating a line of explosions that ran from bow to stern. Commander Zexthal felt his ship shudder as the human weapons tore through its structure. Alarms were blaring throughout the bridge. Half of his crew was either dead or unconscious. The Eternal Conquest, pride of the Dominion fleet, was dying. How are they doing this? Zexthal screamed at his surviving officers. "They're primitives. They barely know how to travel between stars. How are they destroying us?" The answer was simple, but it was something that the Dominion couldn't understand. The aliens had become so advanced, so sophisticated in their thinking, that they had forgotten the basic principles of warfare. They had created elegant solutions to complex problems, but they had never considered that someone might use simple, brutal methods to defeat them. Humans had learned to fight on a planet where survival meant being tougher and meaner than anything else around. They had developed weapons that were designed to kill efficiently, not to look pretty or demonstrate technological superiority. When humans went to war, they didn't worry about fighting fair or following rules. They worried about winning. Jake Sullivan was beginning to understand this as he watched the battle unfold. The Liberty was badly damaged, but it was still fighting. His crew was exhausted, but they were still at their posts. The alien ships were bigger and more advanced, but they were also more fragile. They depended on their shields and their energy weapons. When those systems failed, the ships themselves couldn't take much punishment. "All ships," Jake broadcast to his small fleet. "Focus fire on the command ship. If we can take out their leader, the rest of the fleet might break." The three human ships converged on the Eternal Conquest. The alien flagship was trying to retreat, but it was too big and too slow. The Liberty, Defiance, and Vengeance surrounded it like wolves attacking a wounded bear. Jake's railguns fired continuously, punching holes in the alien ship's hull. Brooks' nuclear warheads created X-ray laser pulses that cut through the ship's internal structure. Foster's accelerator cannon fired relativistic projectiles that passed completely through the vessel from one side to the other. The Eternal Conquest was dying. But Commander Zexthal was not ready to give up. He had one more weapon that he hadn't used yet. The ship's main cannon was a planet killer, a weapon that could crack the crust of a world. It was designed to destroy entire continents, not to fight small ships. But desperation was making him consider options he had never thought of before. "Charge the primary weapon," Zexthal ordered. "Target the third planet. If we cannot defeat these primitives, we will at least destroy their homeworld." The weapon began to charge. Energy readings throughout the ship spiked as power was diverted to the massive cannon. The weapon was designed to fire a beam that would turn Earth into a ball of molten rock. It would take 30 seconds to charge fully, but once it fired, humanity would be extinct. Jake saw the energy build up on his sensors. "They're charging some kind of massive weapon. It's pointed at Earth." Paul Martinez was studying the readings. "Captain, the energy signature is off the charts. If that thing fires, it will destroy the entire planet." Jake felt a cold fear settle in his stomach. They had been winning the battle, but if the aliens destroyed Earth, none of it would matter. His sister and her kids, his parents on their farm, billions of innocent people, all of them would die. "All ships, emergency priority," Jake broadcast. "The alien command ship is preparing to fire on Earth. We have to stop them now." The three human ships threw everything they had at the Eternal Conquest. Nuclear warheads, railgun projectiles, and accelerator cannon rounds all converged on the dying alien ship. The remaining Dominion ships were retreating, but they weren't running away fast enough for Jake Sullivan's liking. The alien fleet was moving back toward the edge of the solar system, but they were still in formation and still dangerous. Jake knew that if they escaped, they would return with reinforcements and better knowledge of human tactics. "All ships," Jake broadcast to his small fleet. "Don't let them regroup. We need to press our advantage while we have it." The 3 human ships pursued the retreating aliens. The Liberty was badly damaged, with hull breaches sealed by emergency patches and half her weapon systems offline. The Defiance was in better shape, but Captain Brooks had used most of his nuclear warheads. The Vengeance still had ammunition for her accelerator cannon, but her engines were running at only 60% power, despite their damage. The human ships were still faster and more maneuverable than the massive alien vessels. The Dominion ships had been designed for long-range combat between fleets of similar vessels. They had never been built to fight small, fast opponents that could dart in and out of their formation. Captain Ryan Brooks was studying the enemy formation on his tactical display. "Jake, I'm seeing something interesting. The alien ships are staying close together, but they're not coordinating their movements like they were before. I think losing their command ship confused them." Jake nodded. This made sense. The Dominion had been fighting the same way for 3,000 years. They used rigid formations and centralized command structures. When the Eternal Conquest was destroyed, it had disrupted their entire tactical system. "They're used to following orders from a single commander," Jake said. "Without their flagship, they don't know how to adapt." This was another weakness that the humans could exploit. Human military doctrine was based on flexibility and individual initiative. Every captain was trained to make decisions on their own when communication was cut off. The Dominion, with their emphasis on perfect coordination and following orders, had never developed this kind of independent thinking. Captain Amy Foster saw an opportunity. Her ship's magnetic accelerator cannon was still functional, and she had noticed that the alien ships were bunching up as they retreated. "All ships. This is Vengeance. I have a shot at multiple targets if you can force them closer together." Jake smiled. He had an idea. "Brooks, how many nuclear warheads do you have left?" 4, Jake, but I've been saving them for something special. This is it. I want you to detonate them in front of the alien formation. Not to damage them, to force them to change course. Drive them toward Amy's position. The plan was simple but effective. The Defiance launched all 4 remaining nuclear warheads at the retreating alien fleet. The missiles were programmed to explode in a line across the alien's path. The nuclear explosions wouldn't destroy the ships at that distance, but they would create a barrier of radiation and debris that the aliens would try to avoid. The Dominion ships did exactly what Jake had hoped. They changed course to avoid the nuclear explosions, bunching up even more as they tried to find a safe path through the radioactive cloud. This brought them directly into the firing line of the Vengeance's accelerator cannon. "Multiple targets acquired," Foster announced. Firing. Full spread. The Vengeance's magnetic accelerator cannon fired a stream of depleted uranium rods at the clustered alien ships. The projectiles were moving at relativistic speeds, making them almost impossible to intercept. Each rod carried enough kinetic energy to punch through multiple targets. The results were devastating. The uranium rods tore through the alien formation. Like bullets through paper, 3 ships exploded immediately. 2 more were crippled and began to drift helplessly. The remaining ships in the formation were damaged but still functional, but something else was happening. The alien ships that had been hit were not just being destroyed. They were exploding in ways that damaged other ships around them. The Dominion vessels were so tightly packed with advanced technology that when one system failed, it caused chain reactions throughout the entire ship. Jake watched in amazement as one alien ship's power core overloaded and created an energy cascade that spread to 2 nearby vessels. The Dominion had built their ships to be efficient and powerful, but they had also made them fragile. When something went wrong, it went very wrong. "Their ships are too complex," Paul Martinez observed from his weapons station. They've got so many interconnected systems that damage to one part affects everything else. This was the opposite of human engineering philosophy. Human ships were built to be tough and simple. When the Liberty took damage, the crew could isolate the affected systems and keep fighting. The alien ships were marvels of engineering, but they couldn't handle the kind of brutal punishment that human vessels were designed to survive. The remaining Dominion ships were now in full retreat, but they were no longer acting as a coordinated fleet. Each ship was trying to save itself, and their formation was falling apart. Some ships were moving toward the outer planets, while others were trying to escape the solar system entirely. Jake realized that this was the moment to finish them. All ships split up and hunt down the stragglers. Don't let any of them escape. The 3 human ships separated and began to pursue individual alien vessels. The Liberty chased after a damaged cruiser that was limping toward Jupiter. The ship was twice the size of Jake's vessel, but it was clearly in trouble. Its shields were flickering, and it was leaving a trail of debris behind it. Target acquired, Paul announced. The alien ship's shields are failing. I think we can finish it with conventional railgun fire. The Liberty's railgun fired a continuous stream of tungsten projectiles at the fleeing alien ship. The metal slugs punched through the weakened shields and tore into the vessel's hull. The alien ship tried to return fire, but its weapons were damaged and its aim was poor. Jake watched as the enemy vessel began to break apart. Explosions rippled along its hull as internal systems failed. Finally, the ship's power core overloaded, and the entire vessel disappeared in a brilliant flash of light. "One down," Jake said to his crew. "Let's find another one." Meanwhile, the Defiance was pursuing 2 alien ships that were trying to escape toward the asteroid belt. Captain Brooks had used all his nuclear warheads, but his ship still had railguns and conventional missiles. The alien ships were faster than his vessel, but they were also damaged and couldn't maintain their top speed. "Weapons officer," Brooks called to his crew. "Load the railguns with fragmenting rounds. I want to create a cloud of debris in front of those ships." The Defiance fired a spread of special railgun projectiles that were designed to break apart. Just before impact, the tungsten fragments created a cloud of high-velocity debris that the alien ships couldn't avoid. The 2 vessels flew directly into the metallic storm. The results were immediate and destructive. The alien ships' hulls were punctured in hundreds of places. Their shields, designed to handle large energy attacks, couldn't cope with thousands of small impacts happening simultaneously. Both ships lost power and began to drift helplessly. Brooks didn't waste time finishing them off. His railguns fired again, this time with solid projectiles that punched through the disabled ships and destroyed their power cores. 2 more alien vessels were eliminated. The Vengeance was having the most success of all. Captain Foster's magnetic accelerator cannon was perfectly suited for picking off fleeing enemies. The weapon could fire projectiles at such high speeds that no ship could outrun them. Foster was methodically hunting down the scattered alien vessels one by one. "Target destroyed," Foster announced over the radio. "That's number 5 for me. How are you guys doing?" Jake looked at his tactical display. The alien fleet that had entered the solar system with 47 ships was now down to less than 20. The survivors were scattered across the outer system, running for their lives. But more importantly, they were no longer a threat to Earth. "This is incredible," Paul said from his station. "We're actually winning." Jake nodded, but he was thinking about the bigger picture. The Dominion had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had conquered thousands of worlds and destroyed countless civilizations. But they had never faced an enemy like humanity. The aliens had become so advanced and so set in their ways that they had forgotten how to adapt. They had perfect weapons for fighting other advanced civilizations, but they had no idea how to handle primitive, brutal, effective tactics. They had been fighting the same way for so long that they couldn't change when they needed to. Humans, on the other hand, had learned to fight on a world where survival meant being tougher and meaner than anything else around. They had developed weapons that were simple, reliable, and devastatingly effective. When humans went to war, they didn't worry about elegant solutions or technological superiority. They worried about winning. All ships, Jake broadcast to his fleet, continue the pursuit. We're not stopping until every alien ship is destroyed or driven out of our system. The 3 human ships continued their hunt through the outer solar system. They were like wolves chasing a scattered herd, picking off the weak and wounded. The alien ships that had seemed so powerful just hours before were now running for their lives. But Jake was thinking about what would happen next. The Dominion wouldn't just give up after losing 1 fleet. 6 hours after the battle began, it was over. The last Dominion ship had been destroyed near Neptune, its wreckage joining the debris field that now stretched across the outer solar system. Captain Jake Sullivan sat in his command chair aboard the battered Liberty, staring at the tactical display that showed nothing but empty space where the alien fleet had been. All enemy vessels destroyed or driven off, Paul Martinez reported from his weapons station. Solar system is clear of hostile forces. Jake felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and disbelief. 3 small human ships had just defeated the most powerful military force in the galaxy. It should have been impossible, but somehow they had done it. The Liberty was held together by emergency patches and prayer, but she was still in one piece. Damage report, Jake said to his crew. Hull breaches on decks 3 and 7, sealed with emergency bulkheads, the engineering officer replied. Main railgun is offline, secondary weapons are functional. Life support is stable but running at minimum power. We've lost about 30% of our combat capability. The other ships were in similar condition. The Defiance had used all her nuclear warheads and taken heavy damage to her forward sections. The Vengeance's engines were running at half power and her magnetic accelerator cannon needed major repairs. All 3 ships looked like they had been through a war, which they had. Admiral Barnes, Jake said into his radio. This is Captain Sullivan. The alien fleet has been eliminated. Repeat, all enemy forces have been destroyed or driven from the solar system. Lisa's voice came back from Earth, and Jake could hear the emotion in it. Outstanding work, Captain, all of you. The President wants to speak with you personally when you return to Earth. Jake looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Galactic Dominion was receiving news of their defeat. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years had just lost an entire fleet to 3 primitive human ships. He wondered how they would react to that news, but Jake didn't have to wonder for long. 2 days later, as the human ships were limping back toward Earth, they received a transmission from deep space. The message was broadcast on all frequencies in dozens of languages, and it was clearly meant for the entire galaxy to hear. People of the galaxy, the voice said. It was translated into English by the ship's computers, but Jake could hear the anger and fear in the alien speaker's tone. This is High Admiral Krextall of the Galactic Dominion. A terrorist attack has been carried out against our peaceful exploration fleet by the primitive species of the 3rd planet of the Sol system. Jake almost laughed at that. Peaceful exploration fleet. The aliens had come to Earth demanding surrender and threatening to destroy the planet. That wasn't exploration, it was conquest. The message continued. The criminals who committed this act will be punished. The Dominion is assembling the largest fleet in our history to bring justice to this barbaric species. The 3rd planet will be reduced to ash, and every member of the human race will be eliminated as an example to other potential rebels. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge of the Liberty in silence. Jake looked around at his crew. They had won a great victory, but it was clear that the war was just beginning. The Dominion wouldn't accept defeat. They would come back with more ships, better weapons, and a desire for revenge. Captain, Paul said quietly, do you think we can do it again? Fight off another alien fleet? Jake thought about this for a moment. The truth was that they had been lucky. The Dominion had underestimated them, and human tactics had caught the aliens completely off guard. Next time, the aliens would be ready for kinetic weapons and nuclear explosions. They would adapt their technology and their tactics, but Jake also knew something that the aliens didn't understand. Humans were good at adapting, too. In fact, they were better at it than most species. Humans had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and natural disasters. They had learned to live in every environment on Earth, from frozen tundra to burning deserts. Adaptation was what humans did best. "We'll figure it out," Jake said to his crew. "We always do." But the real answer to the Dominion's threat came from an unexpected source. Over the next few weeks, as Earth prepared for the inevitable counterattack, news began to reach the solar system from across the galaxy. The story of humanity's victory was spreading, and it was having effects that no one had predicted on the slave world of Kepler 442b. A species called the Zentrons heard about the human victory and decided to rebel against their Dominion overseers. They had been conquered 200 years ago and forced to mine rare minerals for the alien empire. But if humans could defeat a Dominion fleet, maybe the Zentrons could win their freedom too. The Zentron rebellion started with work slowdowns and sabotage. Then it escalated to open warfare when the Dominion sent troops to restore order. The Zentrons didn't have advanced weapons, but they had learned something from the human example. They didn't need to fight like the Dominion expected them to fight. The aliens were used to dealing with rebellions using energy weapons and advanced technology. The Zentrons fought with crude explosives, improvised weapons, and guerrilla tactics. They hid in their mines and used the underground tunnels to move around unseen. They attacked Dominion forces when they least expected it and then disappeared before the aliens could respond. Similar rebellions broke out on dozens of other worlds. Species that had been enslaved for centuries suddenly found the courage to fight back. The news of humanity's victory had shown them that the Dominion could be beaten, and they were determined to win their own freedom. Admiral Lisa Barnes was coordinating Earth's defense preparations when she received a transmission from a species called the Altarians. They had been free traders before the Dominion conquered them 50 years ago. Now they were offering to help humanity in exchange for military assistance. "Admiral Barnes," the Altarian representative said through the translation system, "we have been monitoring your conflict with the Dominion. We wish to propose an alliance. We have ships and weapons that could be useful to your defense." Lisa was intrigued. Earth needed all the help it could get. "What kind of assistance are you offering?" "We have a fleet of cargo ships that could be converted to carry your kinetic weapons. We also have detailed intelligence about Dominion ship designs and tactics. Most importantly, we have something the Dominion fears even more than your weapons." "What's that?" "We have the location of their primary shipyards and weapon manufacturing facilities. If those were destroyed, it would take them decades to rebuild their fleet." Lisa felt her heart racing. This could change everything. Instead of waiting for the Dominion to attack Earth, humanity could take the fight to them. Strike at their industrial base and cripple their ability to wage war. "We're interested," Lisa said. "Let's talk." Over the next month, a remarkable thing happened. Species from across the galaxy began to contact Earth, offering support, information, and alliance. Many of them had been conquered by the Dominion and forced into slavery. Others were independent worlds that lived in fear of alien invasion. All of them had heard about humanity's victory and wanted to join the fight. The humans found themselves at the center of a growing rebellion that stretched across the galaxy. They shared their weapon designs and tactical knowledge with their new allies. In return, they received intelligence about Dominion weaknesses and access to resources they desperately needed. Captain Jake Sullivan was given command of a new ship, the ESS Retribution, which was built using both human technology and alien materials provided by their allies. The ship was 3 times larger than the Liberty, and armed with improved versions of the weapons that had defeated the First Dominion fleet. But the most important thing the humans received from their allies was hope. The galaxy had been living under Dominion rule for so long that most species had given up the idea of freedom. The human victory had changed that. It had shown that the Empire could be defeated, that their advanced technology wasn't invincible. Jake stood on the bridge of the Retribution, looking out at the fleet that was assembling around Earth. Human ships worked alongside alien vessels. their crews sharing knowledge and preparing for the battles to come. It was the largest Alliance fleet that had ever been assembled, and it was all because 3 small human ships had refused to surrender. The Dominion was coming with their revenge fleet, but they would find a very different enemy waiting for them. Instead of 3 primitive ships, they would face hundreds of vessels crewed by species that had learned from humanity's example. Species that had remembered how to fight for their freedom. High Admiral Krextall had promised to reduce Earth to ash and eliminate the human race. But Jake had a different plan. The galaxy had been ruled by fear for too long. It was time for that to change. The war for galactic freedom was about to begin, and humanity had lit the fuse that would burn down an empire. The Dominion had made their biggest mistake when they underestimated what humans would do to protect their home. They were about to learn that when you threaten humanity's family, you don't just face 3 ships. You face a galaxy full of species who have decided that they've had enough of being afraid. The reckoning was coming, and the empire that had ruled through fear was about to discover what real terror looked like.